Welcome and thank you for joining me for Tax Break. This is a podcast about South African tax for South African tax professionals and practitioners. My name is Pieter van der Swan, and in each episode I share my thoughts with you on a topic or a recent development in South African tax. And I try to keep the episodes short enough that you can listen to them whenever you've got a few minutes to spare. Now, today's episode is not a very long one, but it's a topic that if your understanding of these terms is incorrect, could have a massive impact on what you do from a tax perspective. So the topic was motivated by a comment that someone made regarding a structure that they were considering. And without going into the detail of what the transaction and what the structure was, the comment was something along the lines that because the taxpayers are connected persons, it's very likely that we'll qualify for some form of relief in the transaction that we're doing. Now, I really hope that this comment would make most of you as uncomfortable as it made me. And this also prompted me to maybe just go back to some of the fundamental principles that underpin some of the provisions of the tax legislation. So I think the fact is that the concept of connected persons is primarily something that we find in anti-avoidance rules. So if we think about, for example, a transaction where an asset is disposed of between connected persons, you find that there's a specific rule that deems the asset to be disposed of at its market value, because that transaction could be susceptible to price manipulation if the treatment for one person is more favorable than the other, or you may have an incentive to shift the asset to another person without charging the full value and incurring tax on the full value. Same with other anti-avoidance types of provisions, like, for example, the value shifting rule. So conceptually, connected persons requirements fit into these anti-avoidance rules. So what I suspect the person was actually thinking of is the concept of a group of companies. Now, we find that this concept in the corporate rules, in other words, the rules that allow you to do some reorganization transactions where, broadly speaking, the person remains interested in the asset, and you're moving the asset around within some form of an economic unit. We also find it in, for example, the debt concession and compromise rules, where there are certain exceptions if these transactions happen within a group of companies. So the context where we often find the concept of a group of companies is in where there's concessions in the tax legislation. If you compare the definitions of the two, you'll also see that the definition of a connected person, the threshold to be connected is a lot lower than to have a group of companies. So in the context of companies, a person having a 20% shareholding in a company, 20% or more shareholding in a company would often be a connected person. And the net is cast quite wide as to who would be connected persons in relation to each other. So a good example of that is if we look at trusts, the beneficiaries of trusts are connected persons, and the definition extends even further to say it would also extend to the connected persons of those beneficiaries, versus a group of companies where we're looking at a 70% plus shareholding threshold to qualify as a group of companies. And if we're looking at the Section 41 definition, where you looking at corporate rule relief, that definition incidentally is also used elsewhere, not only in the corporate rules. So it's important to see, are you looking at the Section 1 definition or the Section 41 definition? But that definition then has the normal 70% rule, as well as some further exclusions of certain persons or entities whose tax may be different from others. So looking at it conceptually, the connected person definition is very wide. The threshold is quite low because that's where potential transactions that could be susceptible to manipulation can happen, versus the group of companies threshold that is quite high, where you will then get concessions or specific relief from tax consequences that would have otherwise arisen. I think in each instance, it's also important to look at what the actual law and the wording of the law says, not just to think about it conceptually as to where you normally find these terms. But in principle, I think you are likely to find, when you look at this wording of the law, the connected person rules are often anti-avoidance types of rules, while the group rules are mostly relief and concession rules. It's been a short episode, but I hope it gives you something to think about. If you've got any comments, questions, please send me an email. My email address is in the show notes. If you like the podcast and you want to subscribe, please go to your favorite podcast platform. And of course, tell all your friends and colleagues about the podcast. Just a reminder again, as always, nothing in this podcast is intended to be tax advice. So the podcast is only recorded for information purposes. Until next time, goodbye.